Everyone hits a bump in the road. What do you do with it? Be inspired as we explore the ways people experience, navigate, and manage the ups and downs and twists and turns in this road trip called life. Welcome to another episode of Bump in the Road. The basic podcast is always free. We also have a premium subscription called Bump 2 that lets you listen in on extended behind-the-scenes conversations with our guests. Check it out at www.bumpintheroad.us. Monique Verpoort has written a wise and wonderful book, Is This All There Is? Living a Life Beyond Obligation. It's a book about the pursuit of self-knowledge, authenticity, and wisdom. Monique talks about the emerging field of energy psychology and how it can help you not just manage stress, but transform your life. Join me for a transformative conversation. Monique, welcome to Bump in the Road. If you would, tell us your story.
Okay. Well, my story is multifaceted, but I think my starting point would really be a lifelong sense of not feeling good in my skin. I think that's the best way to put it. And seeking just, wanting to be happy, wanting to feel worthy. And I also had I've sort of throughout my life had a low-grade depression. I've never been formally diagnosed with something like that, but I really suspect that there's something there, whether that's birth trauma or whatever past life inheritance, I don't know. But it's sort of been that quest to really, as I said, feel good, feel confident. And I know that's something that I'm certainly not alone in that quest. But I think just exploring different means and modalities to really own my true being and my authentic self. And I'm in my 6th decade now, and it's not finished. It's an ongoing process, but that has really driven me to understand what makes me happy, but other people as well. And as I'm very inquisitive, and I've always sought to explore, find different things that could help, and it kind of led me down this path of greater, I guess, spiritual connection, and looking at some sort of more energy-based kind of modality along the way. So that in my story is really that quest for just owning my authenticity. I think that's really been the key thing. And there have been a lot of bumps along the road that have helped me look at some of those beliefs that were really the cause of the suffering, and being able to work through those. And that's become my life mission, really, is recognizing that we all have these limiting beliefs that really are not conducive to having that joy-filled, space within us, and helping others to kind of, transmute or transform these beliefs into something that's really more empowering and will make them happier in the long run.
I find unraveling our beliefs to be absolutely fascinating. And it's not always pleasant, granted, but when you release a belief that no longer serves you, it is amazing the energy it opens up.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But so many people want to stay in their comfort zone. And I do understand everybody likes to sit on the couch and eat ice cream now and then. But I think that pushing your comfort zone is really the key to living a full life.
It totally is. And I know in my experience too, having, sometimes been in a job over the, past the best before date, or whatever the expression is, and then, not being challenged and staying there because you're comfortable there and you know what to expect. But the flip side of that is that it can be so soul sapping and boring, and because we are programmed to grow. And when we're in a situation where we're not taking those risks and we are choosing to stay safe because it's predictable, and we don't go into that, anxious fight, flight, place, it does have its drawbacks for sure, and it can really make us miserable, if we don't kind of push ourselves out of that comfort zone. And yeah, so for sure, I agree with that.
I've always had a saying when I get too rooted in my comfort zone that if you're bored, it's not because you're bored; it's because you're becoming boring, and and it is time to transform some things.
Oh yeah, that's a really good way of looking at it for sure. Because what do you have to add to the conversation? You've talked about everything, and there's no new exciting tidbits. Because that's the thing. It's when there's something sort of new that you want to explore, and you actually do kind of take that little jump, beyond the parameter of your comfort zone, and then that feeling that you get, it's like a high, right? It's like, oh wow, this is a new experience, and just the novelty of it can be really exciting, and then it makes you a more exciting person too, because you have something new to talk about.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the most interesting adventure we go on is the adventure within.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How would you describe that?
Well, I think the adventure within, first, I think a lot of people maybe don't give themselves the opportunity and the time invested in themselves to go within, because we live in such a world of distraction, and it really does take a sort of discipline to prioritize the journey of going within. And once we start going there and seeing, examining, our thoughts are a big part of this too, in terms of like sort of challenging what is it that we believe about ourselves. If we're starting within ourselves, and it requires quiet, and it requires sort of pausing from the doing of your life to kind of sit there, and it's a discipline. But it is one of those things where if you can just kind of quiet those thoughts and prioritize the time with yourself, it just brings these amazing realizations. And what I love is when I get these thoughts that seemingly come out of nowhere. I call them God thoughts, because I recognize they're not my own. I go, okay, this is not me, because I wouldn't come up with this on my own. I'm too embroiled in kind of the egoic self. But, these thoughts, and it's like, oh yeah, that's right. And I, yeah, okay. It's kind of like a thought that's a bit of a reality check. And if you're really busy and you're not going within, then you don't have the opportunity to hear those thoughts, or those little realizations. So yeah, I think that's probably the way I would look at it.
I've always, I got into meditation about 15 years ago, and for me, it was just game changing. So I'm a big proponent. One of the reasons I'm a proponent of meditation is that it allows you to quiet your mind. And I believe that until you can quiet your mind, you can't witness your thoughts.
Mm.
And when you can witness your thoughts, now you have conscious choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like that. I like what you're saying there about witnessing your thoughts in meditation. And yeah, absolutely. I would totally agree with that. And this whole idea of sort of consciousness, I think people underestimate what that is, it's really sort of that all-knowing intelligence that we all have access to. But if we don't quiet and go within, then we're not in tune with that at all. And it's easy to go through the motions of our day-to-day, doingness, and missing out on these incredible gifts that we get when we're tuned into our consciousness and the answers.
No, life is busy. There's no question about it. But I think that we get so distracted by what I call the bauble du jour, whatever shiny object is, twinkling in front of us, that we really forget that there's so much more to life. And it's so much deeper. In your book, you wrote something that I just love. You said that viewing yourself or your life in black and white thinking, such as always, never, only serves to restrict your worldview.
Mm-hmm.
I love that because it goes to everything in life, really. Choosing to focus outside, choosing to focus inside, finding the balance. Black and white thinking. A friend of mine once said to me many years ago, never make a decision if you can only see two options. You're thinking in black and white.
Mm-hmm.
And that has always stuck with me.
Mm. Yeah. And, the black and white thinking too, what it does, it brings in this judgment piece. Like it's either this or it's this. So if it's this, then this is wrong. And if it's this, then this is wrong. So there is a lot of in between. And, yeah. And if we're black and white, it's such a rigid way of looking at the world. And I think we miss a lot of options because we're focused in that, is it this or is it that? So yeah, it's a flip in your perspective and the way you see the world. And it's something that for a lot of us doesn't come easily. So there again, it's like going back to the awareness and challenging our thoughts in terms of, how we view things, and that there's always another opportunity or a way to look at things.
And it goes to practice. I think you have to practice these things. It's like you have a meditation practice.
Mm-hmm.
It's called a practice for a reason. And I think you have to practice getting out of your black and white zone to be able to see a fuller, richer range of possibility.
Mm-hmm. For sure. It is a practice. A disciplined practice.
But one I think that opens up the world an enormous amount. And it goes to your perception. How do you perceive things?
Mm-hmm.
How do you choose to perceive things?
Exactly. So choose is the operative word here, right?
Absolutely.
Because we underestimate. We have lots of choice. We tend to look at things we don't have control over. And there's a lot of that. You can find evidence of that everywhere. So it is about that perspective shift in terms of, okay, wait a minute, what do I have choice over? And there's a lot you have choice over, in terms of how you think about things, how you respond to things, how you choose to react in certain situations. So, and it's very freeing. It's very freeing to realize that we have more choice than we think. And even, in a practical situation, because I think people can usually relate to that. I know I've been in a work situation where I'm not very happy or satisfied. And then I say to myself, okay, Monique, you've got a choice here. Okay, if you continue to see sort of what's wrong with this situation, yeah, you're going to have a lousy experience. But if you choose to see what is it that actually you're gaining from this, then you're going to see more of that. And it's going to be a much more enjoyable experience, to have. So it really is flipping the switch in that sense.
Oh, hugely. And it goes back to getting out of your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Nope.
No, you wrote, for true transformation to occur, it is only through deliberate attention to what is going on in our mind, body, and spirit that we can consciously choose a different way of envisioning how we wish to show up in our life and what we want to strive towards. Wow, that's just massive. That is a life pivot right there.
Mm.
So why should we want to transform?
Yeah, well, I think transformation is something that you kind of have to be ready for to a certain degree, right? I mean, we always know that true transformation often happens when people, as we say, hit a really low point in their life, and they, that question, is this all there is? Comes to mind. It's like, is this really why I'm on this earth? Am I really doing or getting from this life that I'm living right now what I'm meant to get? Or is there something more to this? And if there's something more to this, maybe I need to look inwards and see what that can be. And so one thing is the thoughts. We know how important our thoughts are because they influence our feelings, and they influence the behaviors that we take. And if we can start to sort of examine, what are these thoughts that kind of keep repeating themselves, on a loop, so that's where the identification, the awareness comes. And, if I'm thinking, okay, I don't know, I look crappy today. Okay, it's a pretty superficial example, but let's go with that one. I'm okay. How am I going to feel? I'm going to feel really insecure, and then my actions. Maybe I'm going to hide, or I'm not going to, present myself to others in the confident way that I would like to. And so, you're going to have a very different response if you're thinking, hey, I'm looking pretty good today. Yeah. Well, and then, you're facing the world, you're showing up in the world in a completely different way. So that's just a small example of that. But also, so that's the thinking portion, but also like our bodies. The feelings are really, housed in the tissues of our body, and we can have a lot of bodily sensations that perhaps we don't tune into, but they're really great messengers in terms of, you have that stomach ache or that headache and saying, hey, what's going on there? What's that about? And trying to tune in to those parts of your body that are trying to communicate with you that there's something that's out of balance or out of, because it's often an imbalance in terms of what we're going through. So there again is sort of tuning into those parts of us and trying to understand, and the spirituality piece. Once again, it's that recognition that, hey, there's more to me than my personality self, and there is a source that is available to each and every one of us, where we can really tap into that for all kinds of nourishment, but also when there are things that we can't cope with in our lives, that there is, we can get help. There's help available to us, but we need to be open to it. We need to ask for it and tune into it. So so it helps us to all these things together. When we can start to transform that, it can give us a different experience of our life. So back to your original question, why do we need transformation, or how, why is transformation necessary? I think it naturally sort of happens when we're at those parts in our lives, like those bumps in the road that you so eloquently talk about in your podcast, where we take stock and we look and we go, okay, this isn't working. There's got to be something more fulfilling, enriching, enlightening, something that makes me feel better, because our thoughts can make us feel terrible. So yeah, I think just kind of getting to that point, and we get there at different parts, different times in our lives, and it's not a one-time thing. It usually happens cyclically, where we have to take stock of what's going on. So it can just bring us to a much happier place when we do look at those things.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. Transformation is a function of a variety of different events. And I think at each critical event point, we have a fundamental option to turn to deal with the outside world, which we have to do no matter what. But do we choose to turn within? I think it's when you turn within and you start looking at yourself, your beliefs, your reactions, etc. I think that is the point of the beginning of the transformation voyage.
Mm-hmm. It has to be, because if we're so focused on the outer, we're getting sucked into this narrative, and whether we like it or not, there are so many narratives out there that you can't help, unless you cut yourself off from the world and live at the base of a mountain or
that
wherever.
Sounds kind of good some days, doesn't it?
It does. And necessary too. But if it's, you can't do it all the time. But it's like a reprieve. And Pat, as a meditator, I wanted to say meditation and Pat at the same time. As someone who meditates, you can appreciate that feeling of like this peace and serenity that you cannot get from anywhere else. In the outside world, it's not out there. It's in here, and it refreshes and nourishes us in order to be able to deal with what's out there. So it just gives us that advantage.
And I think when it comes to meditation, one of the things that's so interesting about a meditation practice is when you find this peace, certainly you have the ability to look at yourself a little bit more objectively. But I think one of the really important benefits of it is that you start to carry this peace inside you into all of your life.
Mm.
You know there's a place of peace. You know there's like a pause where you have a choice in terms of how you react. And you have to practice this. It doesn't just happen. But being able to carry that bit of peace is really game changing. You may find yourself in traffic and enraged at the idiot in front of you who is doing whatever they're doing that doesn't please you.
Mm-hmm.
But you can let go of that and you can find peace in the moment. You can choose not to react, not to judge. And it really is life changing.
Mm-hmm. It's good for your health too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. And I think to add to what you said there too is I think it puts things into perspective, so we don't get sucked into the drama of these events. It's like it gives us some space from it, and it's like, okay, that's what they're doing. That's fine. I might not like it, but that's their path, and you know what? I'm not gonna get my blood pressure up in in the danger zone because what somebody else is doing is really getting to me to that degree. So yeah. And people notice that when you walk around as this sort of peaceful carrier, it impacts other people in your sphere. And that's the beauty of it. It can be sort of this contagious effect that is really nice.
One of the things you wrote about in your book that I found really interesting was energy psychology. Talk a little bit about it, if you would.
Sure. So energy psychology is sort of an umbrella term, and it really refers to any kind of energy-based type modalities that kind of work with the body's energy system for healing and well-being. And it is a term I can't recall. I'd read this somewhere, but I can't quite recall who coined that. It's probably a term that's existed for at least a decade, if not more. And in fact, yeah, it is for sure over a decade. But it is it really speaks to those, as I said, the modalities that work with the body's energy system for healing. And the beautiful thing about that is that we have more and more research studies that are really confirming the efficacy of these types of modalities under that umbrella of energy psychology. So it's improving this psychology by working with the energy system is kind of, if you kind of want to simplify it.
Reiki's one, tapping. There are I think you wrote there were over 60 types of energy modalities that can be used. That's astonishing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it totally is. Before I sort of started researching for the book, I didn't realize it was that many either. So it's, yeah. So that's the beauty too. It's that there's not just one thing, there's a lot of different things for different people, whatever kind of, people fancy, but it is certainly, it's an area that hopefully, especially with the research and people having experiences of using these different modalities that fall under that umbrella, is going to really, become more of a mainstream, recognition that it's psychology is not just working with the cognitions; it's working with the whole energetic system of the person. And I like it because it's a holistic approach, really, that is has the benefits of sort of cognitive behavioral therapy, but then it goes deeper into what else might be impacted. And as we know, I love looking at the body in that holistic sense, right? We are more than our bodies. We are, our spirit is part of that holistic balance, as well as our emotional and physical parts of us. So,
does energy psychology start to integrate some of the Eastern perspectives into Western psychology? And I think, in combining the energy along with, the psychological aspect of it.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm not sure how much of that is actually happening. I mean, if you think about something like yoga, for instance, in a way, that's probably under that energy psychology umbrella as well, because we're moving with all these different, asanas and so on. We're facilitating the flow of energy within the body, or qigong, or any of those kind of practices. Those are recognized now after they were, weird back in the 70s, right? I mean, it's a very accepted practice, and it's something that I know there are physicians, not all of them, but a number of them, think nothing of recommending. If somebody comes to their office and that's really got a lot of issues around stress, is recommending yoga or qigong or something like that. That's very normalized. So I think it's already happening, but maybe depends on the modality as well.
Well, I'm a fan of acupuncture, and I think this energy aspect of the equation is really important to overall health, actually. Mm-hmm. And I notice more and more people are bringing up NFT, which is tapping, correct?
Is it NFT? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, NFT. Was it neuro? Let's just stay with tapping, okay?
Okay.
And the thing that I found really interesting about it was the fact that it targets these energy meridians in our body.
Mm-hmm.
And, from an East meets West kind of perspective, that makes total sense to me.
Right. Yeah. And what's interesting too is that for people that are maybe not as attuned to sort of the Eastern, viewpoint or philosophies, there's the science is actually these meridians. It has a name. It's the premovascular system. And so it's these ducts, energy ducts that are very hard to see. That's why they're not fully recognized by the Western medicine. But I know in South Korea, there have been researchers that have been experimenting with using a dye. And they can actually see this premovascular system in the body, and they can see these pools of energy at these meridian points, acupoints. So it's really fascinating to have that kind of validified. That it's what we call meridians, and in acupuncture, they're actually the science is bearing that out. Other than just looking at a chart with all these meridians on them.
No, that's fascinating. Can they actually follow the flow of energy as you say use tapping or Reiki or something, and see the impact of it on the body?
That I'm not sure if they've taken it to that level already, but there is the existence, and those studies might be happening, as we speak. Not sure. I haven't read anything on that, to be honest. I've just kind of been able to find out the research sort of around what's happening with just identifying that these meridian pathways do exist in the body.
Who are some of the key people in energy psychology?
Mm-hmm. Well, Dr. David Feinstein, who is really a key psychologist who has written undertaken a lot of research projects, is one of them. And his wife, Donna Eden, is a very well-known medical energy intuitive, let's say, for lack of a better word. And she actually is somebody that sees energy fields, and she has had an incredible impact on sort of that world of energy medicine, energy psychology. There's Dawson Church as well, he's a scientist. He's written a number of books, avid tapper. Dr. Peta Stapleton from Australia is incredible as well. She's done a lot of research, meta-analysis, and so on all kinds of things like eating disorders and all kinds of PTSD, those kind of things. And there's been, I think those are the main sort of research people that I'm aware of. And I wanted to say something else, and it just left my brain. I'm hoping it's going to come back. Okay.
Well, no, go ahead. Go ahead. If it came back into your brain, go ahead.
No, it didn't. It didn't. Something else did, but not that.
Well, no, I find this very interesting. It seems like a lot of people are talking about, is it psilocybin, mushrooms essentially, for therapeutic purposes, particularly with PTSD.
Yeah.
And the idea being it kind of disrupts your standard way of viewing things and opens your world greatly to the possibility of new perspectives and experiences. And in that, it can be very transforming. Mm-hmm. And it seems to me that this energy psychology also could play into transformation in a very similar way, because you're looking to shift energy, shift thought, shift perspective in the body. And why in the world couldn't a physical modality help with that?
Exactly. And it's really about the state of the nervous system and sort of the predominance of a lot of people, especially now, are in fight flight. And just in terms of living today and the impact of COVID, and just life in general, all the complexities and everything. And so when you can have sort of a physical modality that taps into that energy and is able to help you ascend from out of that fight flight state into the sympathetic nervous system state on a more regular basis, that can be such a transformative experience for somebody and help on so many different levels, just in terms of having a coping skill for one, but also beyond the coping skill, being able to rid oneself of sort of these self-defeating beliefs that are largely subconscious, and sort of bringing them to light, and then being able to totally see them for what they are, that they're not real, and challenge them in a way that's sort of simple and gentle, and creates more energy in the body, because when we're in that fight flight state, we don't have a lot of available energy to put towards anything else, because we're just trying to stay above water. When we can get into that more empowered sympathetic nervous system rest digest place, all of a sudden all these possibilities open to us, and we have greater energy to actually go and take these action steps that we want to take, that otherwise we just don't have the energy or the inclination to take otherwise.
Where could one start with this?
Read my book. No,
no, seriously, read her book. It's a great book. And the name of your book? And the name of your book?
Is this all there is? Living a Life Beyond Obligation. So, where one can start, I think, there's so much available out there on the internet. So, I mean, my modality sort of choice, you can start with energy psychology and just see what comes up, because you're going to get different things and see which one kind of resonates with you. Because, I'm a huge believer and passionado of EFT tapping, but that might not be somebody else's kettle of fish. I know a lot of people that are like, nah, not my thing. So really see if that resonates or not, and just start to understand, but through reading and through experimentation. Tapping is a nice one to kind of start with, just to get the immediate benefit, and you can do it on yourself, which is why I love it so much, because it's such an accessible, democratic tool that doesn't require a professional for sort of that stress management capability. If somebody's working through more sort of a traumatic type events, then I always recommend see a professional for that, because you don't want to tap into something that you thought you had gotten over, and all of a sudden, whoosh, it's coming up and flooding your nervous system. So there's always a caveat to that. I think it's simple, but we take that responsibly. But yeah, there's a lot out there. I think if I would recommend ASEP, which is the Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology, is a really good one. And for those people that perhaps really, want to see the science to even consider that this could be something for them, they have a lot of research on there. There's a one-page fact sheet, and they can see all the meta-analysis and all the studies. Like there's a cortisol study where they measure the saliva pre and post an hour and a half tapping session, and they see, I think it's a 47% reduction in cortisol in the saliva. Things like that. And there's a lot of really interesting things. That's a good one to probably start with, I would think.
For somebody who's just hit a horrific bump in the road, their life is just falling apart.
Yeah. If
you could give them 3 things to consider, what would you tell them?
I would say, and this is not to simplify or minimize anybody's suffering, but I would say, first of all, self-compassion. So, often when things happen, we tend to interpret through our own lens, in terms of, is this something that I caused? Did I contribute to this in any way? Is this somebody else that, I'm in the situation because of somebody else's doing, or all of the above. And we can start really becoming very cruel to ourselves and sort of adding to our distress. And I think if you can kind of, just stay still and say, okay, accept this is what I'm going through. This is really tough, but you know what? I'm doing the best I can. I think sometimes we talk about these affirmations, but they can be really helpful just in terms of just taking stock, giving yourself space, giving yourself, cut yourself some slack and say, okay, you know what? Whatever's happening, I'm dealing with this the best way I can right now in this moment. Just, get rid of the judgment. And it's not easy. So I'm not in any way suggest it easy, but if there again, it's just like, go to your heart space and just say, okay, you know what? I'm just, take some deep breaths, allow yourself to kind of decompress. I just see decompose. No, decompress. And, and just, whatever you need to tell yourself, and I'm going to be okay. This is really hard right now, but I am going to be okay. And even though we feel like we're not, we will be. You will be. With time, you will be. And yeah, so self-compassion is, I guess, number one. And taking just take some time for yourself, take some space away from everybody, and just kind of sit with that a little bit. And then I would say, we have tools that can really help us. And in terms of the tapping, which I talk a lot about in my book, is just touching these meridian points that really impact our nervous system and just bring us down to a more peaceful state. Oh my gosh, it can, and with the breathing at the same time, the two kind of go together, the deep breath and the tapping these points. But boy, it can take down our stress levels considerably. So, and maybe even, I would say number 3, I would put it to number 1, is that if you could just kind of, start looking at these points, breathing and saying those things to yourself, this is hard, but things will get better. I accept where I am right now. Because often the suffering is increased when we resist what's happening. And we think about all the reasons why this happened to me. It's not fair. That stuff it adds to our stress levels. And if we can kind of just say, okay, you know what, this is what's happening right now. And, I'm dealing with it as best I can, right? Self-compassion. This is not going to be this way forever. And tap on these points while you breathe. I think, that's my first go-to. And I've had a number of sort of bumps on the road where they just totally overwhelmed me. And I found that those things that I just talked about were really what got me through it.
What was your worst bump?
Well, I think one of the worst ones was I had a fall in November 2018, and I hit my head. I was walking with my husband. I tripped on his foot, and I fell backwards, and I hit my head really hard at the base of a tree, and I blacked out. And then I tried to get up, and I stumbled, and I blacked out again. I fell down, and I had it was a mild traumatic brain injury I ended up with. And for me, it was just a lot of cognitive deficits, like my processing speed. When people talk to me, like trying to, I couldn't understand as easily as I could. I was slower. I had the brain fog, and I was off work for a while and that kind of thing. And that was a huge one, because I just felt like I was not the same person I was before I went out for that walk that morning and hit my head. And so there was so much that came up for me in that. It was the grief or the loss of sort of not being where I was before in terms of some capacity in my thinking. And it was fear, a lot of fear. Like, am I going to stay like this? Is this my new normal? And and just other things linked to it. I think some anger around, okay, not the why me, because I'm not a why me person, but it was still like, okay, I was on a certain path, and now I have to like reassess and maybe not do what I was thinking I was going to do. So a lot of sort of uncertainty. And I think once again, with the tapping, it gave me the sort of it helped me deal with it, and it helped me change my perspective. So back to our original conversation, it helped me change my perspective of what had happened. And I realized that I could become a better version of myself because of this fall. Because what I was finding was that because I was cognitively, I had some limitations, I was leading more with my heart space. And it was really interesting because I was the type of person who was very analytical in terms of my approach to people. I'd be thinking things out before, and then after this fall, it was more like I was more open, and my head was out of the way, and I was kind of meeting people in a more heart-centered way. And I thought, wow, this is a new way of relating for me. Someone who's been super reserved and private, most of my life, and then just I thought, hey, I like this. so it's, I think that was a big one for me. And I've had a few others, but I think because that one was the most recent, it still, was a biggie.
That's fascinating, though. I've talked to a number of people who've had head trauma. And one of the common threads that comes out of all the conversations is this idea of, first of all, it's an assault on your identity. I was smart, I was capable, I'm not. Mm-hmm. That alone is just terrifying. And you don't know if you're coming back or not, or what's going to happen. But almost everybody experienced kind of a shift into their right brain. Mm-hmm. And which kind of coincides with the idea of working from your heart more. Yeah. And I think that kind of, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to gather my thoughts a little bit. Almost everybody that went through this had a profound insight and experience that really opened their life. None of it was easy, but it opened their life up. And it has made me wonder if, as a society, we shouldn't be focusing more on right brain development as opposed to our very linear left brains, which is where we all live. It's how we're trained. It's how we're educated. It's how our society runs, most of our society. And I really wonder what would happen if we could tap into that more creative, open, kind, compassionate part of ourselves.
Wouldn't the world look very different, Pat? It would be a totally different. Yeah, absolutely. And we always have that, emphasis on like IQ, intellectual quotient or whatever, rather than the emotion, emotional intelligence, right? And that emotional intelligence is what you're describing too. It's, all that, the sort of the more social skills or the more, leading from that heart place and kindness. And, even just, I don't know about you where you live, but I just noticed here, even in the neighborhood, I'm in Canada here, and, I'm in a nice street, but people don't even make eye contact with each other, or it feels very alienating. And it's like, what happened to the just looking at someone and saying hello or waving, and it's so unfortunate. Is it because we're all so preoccupied in our left brain that we're not opening ourselves up to other people in just that human way?
No, it's very weird. I lived in a place for 18 years, and people would kind of say hi here and there, but not super friendly. You drive up, you go into your garage, the door goes up, the door goes down. That is the extent of your interaction with most of the people around you. And I don't think it's healthy. It's interesting where I'm living now, which is a small town in northern Arizona, which I'm not going to share because I don't want everybody moving here. People say hi. It's like unbelievable. People say hello. They smile. Now, not everybody, but most people, if you're out like walking or something, people stop. They say hi. How are you? You comment on their dog or whatever. Just little things. It is atypical for somebody to walk by and not recognize you.
Wow.
And I don't mean
beautiful.
Personally, just hi, how are you?
Yeah. It's like connection, like I see you,
Yeah.
And no, for sure. I recognize in what you're saying. One place that I get that from is when I go on my walks as well, is that it seems to be just people that you meet on a trail. Obviously, there's not a lot of people around, but it's that recognition. Hey, I'm enjoying this experience, as are you, and nice to meet you, kind of thing. So I think that's really so important, and what's missing a lot in people's lives.
And unfortunately, I think it's missing because people are very fear-based. They're very closed. Mm-hmm. And the reality is, if you're too friendly, they'll think you're psychotic.
This is true. It's like, what do you want?
Yeah. Any final words of advice for people that you'd pass along from your experiences? Because your book really is terrific. It's so wise. I really would urge everybody who's on a trip of transformation, or where things just don't feel right in your life, you can't figure out what's up, this is a book that offers wisdom. Any last words of wisdom you'd leave people with?
Yeah, I just like to say too that, thank you for that. I appreciate that. But I think part of the reason that I really wanted to get this message out too is that, in particular, any women that are listening, is that we are conditioned to really put everybody needs ahead of our own for the most part. And we can really forget about ourselves in the process. And, once again, it's about valuing that your needs are just as important as anybody else's, and really owning that. And, it'll just make life easier. You'll be able to set better boundaries. You'll be able to have a kinder self-dialogue with yourself and not judge yourself, because a lot of people are miserable because they are just, that inner critic is like constantly at them. You're not doing enough, you're not being enough. And so it's spreading the self-compassion. I think that for me is the biggest thing here.
Thank you for listening. I hope you'll support this podcast by becoming a Bump 2 subscriber. Buy us a cup of coffee. It's your support that makes this podcast and website possible. I hope you found something in today's podcast that inspires you along your own life's path, because sometimes a bump in the road is actually a portal into a more conscious and meaningful life.